The evening started like any other. I was lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the only sound filling the silence of the house. My eyes drifted from the cracks in the plaster above me to the window where the last bits of daylight were quickly fading. It was the kind of silence that used to feel peaceful. Now it just felt tense. I should have been upstairs in our bed beside her. I used to cherish the way we'd unwind together after a long day. Her soft laugh, the way she'd curl up beside me, as if nothing could break the bubble of comfort we shared. But tonight, something was different. I couldn't even remember the last time I'd actually felt her beside me, really felt her presence. I'd barely even spoken to her all day. We'd barely even looked at each other. And now, as I lay on the couch, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way she'd been acting lately, the way her voice had changed. The arguments, small at first, but growing bigger and more volatile with every passing day, had turned into explosions, unexpected and violent. This morning, when I took out the trash, she'd screamed at me so loudly I froze, caught off guard, staring at her with a mix of confusion and disbelief. "You're such a stupid fool," she'd shouted. "You can't even handle the simplest things. Clean up after yourself." I could feel the sting of her words even now. The venom in her tone had been sharper than anything I'd ever heard from her. She had never raised her voice like that before. Not to me, anyway. I stood there, stunned, trying to figure out what had just happened. My jaw tightened, and before I knew it, I was yelling back, something I swore I'd never do. The whole argument spiraled, as they always did. It wasn't even about the trash anymore. Now, as I lay here, the weight of the fight pressing down on me, it was the only thing that seemed to matter. She was upstairs, behind that door, probably still fuming about what had happened. She wouldn't even let me into the room. The door was locked, and I was on the couch alone. I could hear her, muffled, muttering something under her breath. I didn't even want to know what she was saying. But that's when the thought hit me. She's hiding something. It wasn't just the yelling. It wasn't just the little sharp comments that made my skin crawl. It was everything else. The late nights, the secretive glances, the way she was always rushing off somewhere, always coming home late, smelling like something else, something unfamiliar. The way she'd glance at her phone in the middle of a conversation, her face going blank as soon as I tried to see what she was looking at. All those things added up, piece by piece, until the truth seemed impossible to ignore. But what was the truth? I turned my head and stared at the clock on the wall. It was late, later than usual. The house felt empty, even though I knew she was here. It wasn't just the physical absence of her presence, though. It was this distance, like we'd been slipping away from each other for months, and now there was no way to pull ourselves back. It felt like the calm before a storm that I knew was coming, but had no idea how to prepare for. I sat up, rubbing my temples, trying to clear my mind. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what. I couldn't figure out where the cracks had first appeared. Was it that morning's fight? Was it the way she'd started pulling away? Or had I missed something before that? I could feel the weight of my suspicion creeping up on me, but I tried to ignore it. I had no proof. I had nothing but a gut feeling, and that wasn't enough. She's hiding something. The thought echoed through my mind. I could feel it settling deep into my bones, but I didn't know where to go from here. The question was too big. The answer was too terrifying. I glanced back at the stairs. If I went up there now, what would I even say? And if she was hiding something, what would I find? I woke up to the soft hum of the house. The sunlight was already filtering through the curtains, casting pale streaks of light across the floor. It was 10 a.m. I must have fallen asleep on the couch, somewhere in the haze of the night, too exhausted from the argument to make it upstairs. The weight of the fight still lingered in the air, thick and suffocating, but I knew I had to face it, whatever it was. I pushed myself off the couch, the springs creaking beneath me in protest. My body ached from the uncomfortable position, but it wasn't the physical pain that I was feeling. It was the tension, the pressure. It felt like the air in the house had thickened overnight, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something, anything, to happen. I took a few slow steps toward the kitchen. I could hear the sound of clinking dishes, the faintest hum of a radio playing some news station, and the low murmur of my wife's voice. The smell of something cooking filled the house. Eggs, bacon, something sizzling. But the odd thing was it wasn't for me. She didn't turn around to greet me, didn't even acknowledge my presence. She was focused, her back to me, her hands moving mechanically as she worked. It was so strange, so different. I stood there in the doorway for a moment, watching her. The woman I used to know, the woman I used to love, seemed so far away now. She was absorbed in her task, seemingly indifferent to me. And I had this sudden realization that this wasn't the same person I married. The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. I tried to swallow the knot in my throat, gathering the courage to speak. This had to be resolved. We couldn't go on like this. I couldn't stand it anymore. I took a step forward, trying to keep my voice steady, my tone calm. "Hey," I said, my voice hoarse from the night's yelling. "I'm sorry about last night. I didn't mean to spill the garbage." I laughed weakly, trying to break the ice, trying to make light of it, but it sounded ridiculous as soon as the words left my mouth. It sounded funny, me apologizing for some garbage. The silence between us hung for a beat, heavy and charged, before she turned around. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something sharp in her eyes, something cold. "What?" Her voice was quiet at first, but the edge was already there. "Is that all you want to apologize for?" She shot back, her tone rising with each word. "What else do you do wrong, huh? Do you even care?" I froze. I didn't know what to say, how to make this better, how to fix it, but she wasn't finished. What else?" she shouted, her voice cracking. "You've been walking around here like you don't even see me anymore. I've been screaming at you, trying to get you to wake up, and you just don't get it." Her words hit harder than I expected, harder than I was prepared for. I could feel my heart racing, blood rushing to my face as she let loose. She was right. She was right about everything. But something inside of me snapped. I had been holding it in for so long, but now I couldn't stop myself. "You're the one who's a fool," I shouted, my voice rising in anger, matching hers. "You make an elephant out of everything. Every little thing sets you off. Every tiny thing becomes a big drama." The words tumbled out of me in a rush. All the things I'd been too afraid to say. All the little frustrations I had buried deep inside. "You've been yelling at me for months, about nothing. And I just take it because what else am I supposed to do? You don't want a husband. You want someone to yell at. Someone to blame for everything that goes wrong in this damn house." Her face turned red, and I could see the veins in her neck straining, her chest heaving with each breath. She didn't respond at first, just stood there, staring at me with wide, furious eyes. But then, without warning, she grabbed the plate of food she had been preparing, a plate I hadn't even noticed before, and slammed it onto the floor. The plate shattered into pieces, scattering across the kitchen tiles like shards of glass. She looked at the mess, then back at me, her eyes full of venom. "I'm done," she spat, her voice low and dangerous. "You'll never understand. I'm not staying here with you, not like this. I'm leaving. This is over." My breath caught in my throat. I stood there, frozen, not quite believing what I was hearing. My mind scrambled to catch up with what was happening. "Don't you dare walk out that door," I managed to say, but the words sounded weak, as if I had no power left in me. She didn't look at me again. Instead, she grabbed her jacket off the hook by the door, and in a final, violent motion, she shoved her feet into her shoes, her movements stiff with anger. I couldn't move. I couldn't stop her. And before I could even open my mouth to say something, anything, she turned toward the door and slammed it behind her with a force that rattled the walls. She was gone. Just like that. I stood there, amidst the broken pieces of the plate, the silence pressing in on me like a weight I couldn't escape. And as I looked down at the shards on the floor, it felt like everything had shattered in an instant. I sat there, clutching my head in my hands, the remnants of the morning's chaos still echoing in the silence around me. The broken plate, the shattered fragments of our last conversation, seemed to reflect the wreckage inside my mind. Part of me wanted to run after her, to beg her to come back, to fix it somehow. But the other part of me, the part that had been watching this slow unraveling for weeks, knew better. I could almost feel the weight of her words from earlier pressing down on me. I'm done. She wasn't coming back. I slumped against the wall, feeling like I was suffocating in this quiet, empty house. It was strange, but the silence felt like it was mocking me. The house, once warm with laughter and the mundane hum of daily life, now felt cold and hollow. I couldn't even hear her footsteps anymore. No longer the rhythmic shuffle of her in the kitchen or the sound of her sighing when she read the news. Nothing. I looked around, letting the reality of the situation sink in. She had walked out on me. She had left me. A part of me wanted to deny it, to tell myself that it was just a fight, that she'd be back soon, that this was temporary. But another part, maybe the part that had been silently waiting for this day, knew deep down that something had snapped between us. Something had broken in her, just like everything else. I turned my gaze to the window, watching the sun inch toward the horizon, dragging the day behind it like a tired old animal. I could feel the tension in the air, the weight of everything I couldn't yet put into words. The past few days had been a blur of small fights, sharp words, and her growing distance. And now, sitting in the aftermath, I realized the truth. She had been waiting for this moment. She had been waiting for the moment when she could leave. Whether it was because of me or because she was already looking for someone else, it didn't matter. She had been planning this for weeks, maybe longer. She wanted out. The thought crashed into me like a wave, and before I knew it, I was standing, pacing the room. I couldn't sit still. The anger was bubbling up again, hot and uncontrollable. Why the hell didn't I see it? Why didn't I see how much she was pulling away? I slammed my fist into the wall, once then twice, until my knuckles were sore and bleeding. The pain grounded me, but it didn't help the frustration, the helplessness that was building inside. My mind raced through everything she had said, everything she had done. The late nights, the cold silences, the way she refused to talk to me anymore. It was all there, all of it. And yet, there was nothing solid. No proof. No concrete evidence. Maybe she didn't have anyone. Maybe she was just fed up with me. Maybe she was just tired. I wanted to believe that. I needed to. But it didn't stop the gnawing feeling in my stomach. I couldn't shake the idea that she had someone else. Someone waiting for her. Someone she had already found. What if she was already gone? What if she was already with him? I screamed out loud, a sound of pure frustration and rage, echoing off the walls. I kicked the table, knocking it over, then stood there, breathing hard, my chest heaving with emotion. The room was spinning. I didn't know what to think anymore. But then, just as quickly as the storm had risen, it started to fade. I closed my eyes, trying to slow my racing heart. Calm down, calm down. I had nothing, no real evidence, just suspicion. No one had said anything. She hadn't confessed. Maybe she doesn't have anyone. Maybe it's just me. I breathed in slowly, trying to regain control. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and sat back down on the couch. I knew she would come back. Where else could she go? She had nowhere. Nothing. No family to run to. No friends who lived nearby. She'd be back. She had to be. And then the waiting began. I didn't know how much time had passed before I heard the sound of a car outside. It wasn't the usual sound of her car pulling into the driveway. This one was different, sharper, more sudden. I jumped to my feet, rushing to the window, heart in my throat. A taxi. A taxi. I felt my pulse quicken. I couldn't breathe for a second, staring down at the street as the yellow car came to a stop. My chest tightened, and for a moment I thought I might actually pass out. Was she really gone? Was she really leaving me for good? I heard the car door open, the sound of footsteps on the gravel, and then there she was. She walked toward the house, her head held high, her silhouette outlined by the dimming evening light. She looked beautiful, too beautiful. She was wearing a coat I didn't recognize, her hair freshly done, like she had been out for a long time, maybe on a date. I couldn't tell for sure, but the way she walked, the way her posture was so straight and proud, it made my stomach turn. She didn't look at me when she entered. She didn't say a word. She walked right past me, her heels clicking softly on the floor, the sound echoing in the room like a warning. She didn't even glance at me as she passed by. She didn't need to. She didn't care. She went straight into the bedroom, closing the door behind her with a soft click, leaving me standing there, frozen, unable to speak. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed toward the door, and before I even realized it, I was yelling. "Where the hell were you?" I shouted. "Why the hell are you leaving the house like that? What the hell is going on?" I stood there, waiting for an answer, my voice shaking, my heart pounding, my thoughts a jumbled mess. She didn't respond right away, and that silence, her silence, cut through me like a knife. Finally, the door opened a crack, just enough for her to peek out at me, her eyes cold, distant. "I'm tired," she said flatly. "Tired of everything. Of you. Of us." And then the door closed again, leaving me standing in the hallway, gasping for breath, as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. She was already gone. The tension in the house was unbearable. After she had gone into the room and closed the door behind her, I couldn't just sit there. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let her hide behind that door, behind those walls, while I was left here to swallow her silence. I stood there for a moment, fists clenched, my breath coming in shallow bursts. Every part of me screamed for answers, for truth. What the hell was going on? What had I done wrong? Why was she pulling away? I walked up to the door, not thinking, just feeling the heat of anger rising in me again. My hands shook as I knocked hard, bang, 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 against the wood, my voice now sharp with desperation. "Answer me," I shouted, hitting the door again, this time harder. "Where were you? Where the hell did you? Were you seeing, huh? What is it? What's going on? Tell me the truth." I banged on the door once more. I needed her to respond. I needed her to say something, anything, but there was nothing, not a sound from inside. Just the quiet, hollow air that seemed to press in from every corner of the house. "Don't ignore me," I yelled. "I'm not asking anymore. I'm demanding the truth." But then, through the silence, I heard her voice, sharp and angry, but calm, like she was already done with me. "If you don't stop now, I'll leave," she said, her words cold and final. "I'm not putting up with this anymore. Stop. I'm done." And just like that, it hit me. She wasn't just angry anymore. She was shutting me out. She wasn't going to give me the answers I wanted. She didn't care what I needed to know. A knot twisted in my chest, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse right there. But I couldn't let myself break down. Not yet. I couldn't let her see me lose control. I stood there in front of the door for a long time, my hands still resting on the wood, my head pressed against it as if I could somehow hear her behind it, hear her secrets. But I knew she wasn't going to open the door. I knew she wasn't going to tell me the truth, no matter how hard I begged, no matter how much I demanded it. I turned away and walked into the kitchen, my legs feeling heavy, my mind a blur of frustration. My body ached with the weight of everything, the anger, the hurt, the helplessness. I needed something to quiet the noise, to numb the pain that had started to gnaw at me. I opened the cabinet and grabbed a bottle of whiskey, not caring what time it was, not caring about anything at all. I poured myself a glass, the liquid burning down my throat as I downed it in one gulp. I felt the heat spread through me, momentarily dulling the sharp edge of my emotions. But it wasn't enough. Nothing ever was. Another drink, then another, until the world around me started to blur. The pain started to fade, just for a little while, just enough for me to forget the gnawing ache in my chest. But I knew it wouldn't last. Nothing ever did. I didn't even realize when I fell asleep. The world had become a haze of alcohol and pain, and somewhere between one glass and the next, I drifted off, the weight of everything crashing down on me like 1,000 stones. When I woke up, it was the sound of the door closing that stirred me from my sleep. My eyes snapped open, and for a moment, I didn't know where I was. I was still sitting at the kitchen table, the empty whiskey bottle beside me, the smell of alcohol thick in the air. I wiped my eyes, trying to shake off the fog that clouded my thoughts. Where did she go? I glanced around, confused, my heart pounding in my chest. The house was eerily quiet. I rushed to the window, looking outside. There was no sign of her car, no sign of anyone. It was just the street, empty and still, the early morning light casting long shadows over everything. She's gone. The thought hit me hard, but something in my gut told me this was different. Something wasn't right. I stood there for a moment, frozen. Then I made my way to the stairs, my feet heavy, as if I was walking through thick mud. I had to go to her room. I had to see if she was really gone. When I reached the door, I hesitated. I didn't know what I was hoping for, but I opened it anyway. The room was empty, completely empty. No clothes on the bed, No traces of her things scattered around, not even the faint scent of her perfume in the air. I felt the ground shift beneath me. I couldn't breathe. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving me gasping for something. Anything. "Where are you?" I shouted, my voice cracking. I stumbled backward, my chest tightening as panic clawed at me. "Where the hell are you?" I screamed again, the words tearing from my throat. I spun around, desperate, my eyes scanning every corner of the room, as if hoping to find a clue, a sign that she was just hiding somewhere, playing a cruel game with me. But the room was as empty as it had always been. I couldn't take it anymore. My hands shook as I looked around, and without thinking, I began to destroy everything in my path. I slammed my fist into the nightstand, knocking it over. The dresser. The mirror. I screamed, again and again, the words spilling out like a tidal wave, frantic and wild. "What the hell is this? Why are you doing this to me?" My voice cracked, raw with emotion, as I continued to throw things, break things, destroy everything in sight. I didn't care anymore. I didn't care about anything except finding the answer. But there was no answer. There was only the emptiness of the... I sat there, on the floor, staring at the ceiling. The house felt even emptier than it had last night. The silence was deafening, like the walls were closing in on me. I couldn't escape the feeling of being suffocated by it all. The anger, the betrayal, the confusion. Every inch of this place felt foreign now, like it no longer belonged to me. I don't know how much time passed before I stood up, but I did. I wasn't sure what I was even trying to accomplish. I couldn't focus. Everything felt like a blur of chaotic thoughts, a mix of rage and helplessness. And then it hit me, the basement. We had a small, separate stairwell leading down to it, through the garage. I hadn't been down there in months, maybe even longer. But I needed something to numb the pain, the crushing weight of my own mind. So I grabbed my jacket, not caring about the cold, and walked through the garage, heading toward the basement. The cabinet in the basement, filled with bottles of wine, my collection, was waiting for me. I'd been collecting those bottles for over 20 years. A hobby, a passion. But today, I didn't see them as treasures. I didn't see them as anything but a way to drown out the screams in my head. I was done with this. I was done with everything. I don't care anymore. That thought was all I had left. But as I reached the door to the basement, I froze. Something was off. The lock, it was gone. The metal latch, which should have been secured tightly, was completely undone. My heart skipped a beat. I felt a sudden cold rush sweep over me. No. No, no, no. Don't tell me, I whispered to myself. The sickening thought hit me like a freight train. I've been robbed. I quickly reached for the door, my hands trembling as I yanked it open. I tried to push down the panic, but it was useless. I could hear muffled sounds coming from below. Voices. Strange voices. A man's low murmur and a woman's laugh. Then, a woman's voice, a voice I knew all too well. It was her. My heart pounded, the world around me spinning as I took a step down into the dark, creaking stairs. The sounds were getting clearer now. The man's voice was harsh, but there was something too familiar about it, something that made my skin crawl. I had heard that voice before, but I couldn't place it, couldn't connect the dots. And then I heard her. Her laugh, that laugh. Not the nervous, tired one she gave me, but the one she used when she was genuinely enjoying herself. That sound was a blade through my chest. I moved faster now, each step a drumbeat in my ears. I was so close. Just a few more steps, just a little further, and then I saw it. The sight in front of me made everything inside me stop. There they were. The man was standing over her. His hands were gripping her hair, pulling her head back roughly. She was without clothes, her body vulnerable, her skin glistening in the dim light of the basement. She didn't see me at first. I stood there, frozen in place, my breath caught in my throat, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The man looked up, finally noticing me. His eyes widened, but he didn't move. He didn't do anything. He just stood there, a smirk playing on his lips like he was daring me to do something. He was taller than me, broad-shouldered, his frame imposing, but none of that mattered. I could barely breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't process what I was seeing. I could barely hear anything beyond the rush of blood in my ears. My vision was narrowing, everything around me blurring. I felt the weight of it, the full weight of what I was seeing, crash over me like a wave of ice-cold water. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My mouth was dry. I felt my knees buckling beneath me, but somehow I stayed standing. I didn't want to look away. I couldn't look away. You son of a fool. I finally managed to croak out, my voice hoarse and broken. The man didn't even flinch. He just smirked, pulling her head back even further, and then he let out a low, mocking laugh. "You're too late," he said, his voice dark, almost too calm. I felt like I was suffocating. Every inch of my body screamed at me to run, to get out of there, but my feet were glued to the floor. I couldn't move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the nightmare unfolding in front of me. She was with him. She had been with him this whole time, and then, as if to confirm the truth of what I had just discovered, she finally turned to look at me. Her eyes met mine, but they weren't full of guilt. They weren't full of shame. No, they were empty. Empty of anything that resembled love, anything that resembled the woman I had married. She didn't even seem surprised to see me. "You don't have to do this," I choked out, pleading now, the words tumbling out in a broken, desperate mess. "Why are you doing this to me? Why?" Her eyes narrowed slightly, and for the first time since I had walked down those stairs, she spoke. "You should have figured it out sooner," she said, her voice cold, almost indifferent. "But it's too late now." She didn't even seem sorry. She didn't even seem to care. She had moved on. She had already moved on. And I was still here, frozen, watching everything I thought I knew about my life unravel in front of me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something, anything, to make sense of this mess, to force the world to go back to the way it had been before. But there was no going back. There was no going back. I could feel my body shaking, my heart pounding painfully in my chest as I took one final step back toward the stairs, my head spinning, my vision fading. I didn't know how long I stood there, staring at them. I didn't know how long I just watched. But eventually, I turned and fled. I ran back up the stairs, not caring how loud my feet were, how loud my breath was. I just ran, and I kept running, as if running could erase what I had just seen, as if running could make me forget what had happened. But I knew it wouldn't. Nothing would. I ran out of that basement, the air searing through my lungs. But even as I was halfway up the stairs, a voice inside me screamed, "Why are you running away?" I stopped in my tracks. My hands were still trembling. The blood was pounding in my ears. But there was a part of me that knew I couldn't leave. I couldn't run from the truth anymore. I couldn't let this go. She wasn't just cheating. She wasn't just sleeping with another man. She didn't even care. She hated me. It felt like everything inside me was breaking at once. My body, my mind, my entire life. I stood there, staring at the door to the basement, my legs unwilling to move. The world felt dizzy, like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and any moment I could fall. But I couldn't leave it like this. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen what I had seen. Without thinking, I turned around and went back. The basement door creaked open again. The moment I stepped down, I saw them. They were standing there laughing. Laughing like nothing had happened, like I wasn't standing right there. He was leaning casually against the wall, his hands in his pockets, and she was just standing there, arms crossed, looking at me. She didn't look scared. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look anything like the woman I thought I knew. She looked free. That's when I snapped. "Why?" I screamed, my voice raw, desperate. "Why did you cheat on me? What the hell is wrong with you?" The words felt like they were tearing at my insides. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just wanted her to feel something. I wanted to see her break. I wanted her to see what she was doing to me. I started throwing things, anything I could get my hands on. The bottles, the crates, the old junk we'd stored down there. It didn't matter. I just wanted to break something, to make this all make sense, to force her to see me, to understand what she had done. But through the noise of my own destruction, I heard him. The man, still standing there, still unfazed, casually turned to her and muttered, "Take it easy. Let him have his tantrum. It doesn't matter." His words struck like a knife, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I was beyond caring. I heard her scream then, "I hate you." The words hit me like a slap in the face. They didn't feel real. They couldn't be real. I don't like you anymore, she continued, her voice laced with venom. I'm tired of living with you. You're disgusting. Look at you. You look like an old man. You're so pathetic. I'm ashamed to be seen with you. I felt my chest tighten. My legs turned to stone. It was like she was ripping me apart, piece by piece. She was saying everything I had feared, everything I had thought but never wanted to hear out loud. I've been looking for a reason to divorce you for a month, she spat. But you're too much of a fool to see it. So I did it today, so you could finally see that I don't love you anymore. I hate you. I froze. My entire body felt like it had been struck by lightning. The world around me went dark, everything narrowing down to her words, her voice, her betrayal. I didn't move. I couldn't. My mind was paralyzed, my soul numb. I didn't know how long I stood there, just staring at her, just trying to make sense of it all. But the moments stretched out endlessly, each second a sharp, agonizing reminder of how little I meant to her. And then, I don't know why, but something inside me snapped. Something in my chest broke wide open. I turned, walking towards the shelf where she kept her precious things. Her cup. The one she had won for first place. The one she had kept like it was the last thing in the world worth holding on to. She had always been so proud of that cup. It was everything to her. It was the one thing she wouldn't let anyone touch, let alone destroy. But I didn't care anymore. I grabbed it, not even thinking, my hands shaking as I held it. She yelled at me to stop, but it was too late. I hurled it across the room, and the sound of it crashing on the floor was like a gunshot. The pieces scattered in every direction, fragments of gold and porcelain. Her precious cup. I didn't stop there. No, I couldn't stop. I walked over to the wall, where her medals were hanging, the ones she had worked so hard for, the ones she had displayed like trophies. I ripped them down one by one, tearing the ribbons, crushing the metal. They hit the floor with a dull thud, and I kept going, throwing them across the room, as if they were nothing, as if everything she had ever worked for was just as meaningless as the life she had built with me. I went to the next shelf, where the diplomas hung, the framed awards she had proudly displayed. I smashed them one by one, breaking the glass, tearing the paper, destroying everything she had cared about. I didn't even care if it was stupid, if it was petty. It didn't matter anymore. She had destroyed me. Now I was going to destroy everything that mattered to her. Everything she had built, everything she had tried to show me that she was worth something. In the end, it all crumbled to dust. And I was standing in the middle of it, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage. A wreckage that I had no idea how to fix. I couldn't calm down. I couldn't breathe. Every second felt like a sharp needle piercing through my chest, over and over again. I had just shattered everything. My home, my life, my sanity. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I didn't even think twice before I grabbed my keys. I just needed to go. I needed to leave. I drove. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. The roads blurred past me in the night, the headlights reflecting off the windshield. But it was all just noise, just a background hum to the madness raging inside my head. I didn't know how long I drove, but by the time I pulled into the parking lot of the hospital, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn off the engine. I staggered inside, my legs weak beneath me. The world felt like it was spinning. My pulse was pounding in my ears. The receptionist looked at me with concern as I stumbled up to the desk. I could barely speak, my throat closing up. I need help, I managed to choke out. They must have seen the madness in my eyes because they didn't hesitate. Within minutes, I was in a room, lying on a bed, a nurse sticking a needle into my arm. The sedative hit me hard and fast, and for the first time in days, I felt the weight of exhaustion pull me under. But sleep didn't bring peace. No, the nightmares came, sharp and vivid. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the emptiness in her eyes, the coldness in her voice. And there was that man, always standing behind her, his smug grin still haunting me. When I woke up, everything felt surreal. I wasn't sure if I was still in the hospital or trapped in the nightmare. But the doctor was there, a calm and collected woman who looked at me like she was studying an equation she couldn't quite solve. "We'll get through this," she said softly, but her words felt hollow. They didn't reach me. I didn't want to be fixed. How could I be? She had destroyed everything. After a few more days of trying to calm my racing thoughts, they assigned me a psychologist. He was a middle-aged man with a soft voice, a reassuring tone. He didn't seem to rush, didn't seem to judge me. I told him everything. I told him about the basement, about what I had seen, about what she had said, about the emptiness, the void she had left in me. But even as the words spilled out, the relief was fleeting. It didn't change anything. It didn't change the pain. "Do you want to live with this? Or do you want to move forward?" he asked me one day, after I had finished spilling my darkest thoughts. I didn't know how to answer. I wasn't sure if I even knew how to live anymore. But I had to try. After another week in the hospital, I couldn't stay. I couldn't stay in the city. I couldn't stay in the place where everything reminded me of her, where every corner of my house held a memory, a shadow of what had been. I left. I didn't even bother to pack. I just grabbed a bag and left, driving as far as I could. I drove out of the city, out of the state, away from everything that had once been my life. I ended up at my great-grandmother's house. It was an old, secluded place, deep in the woods, far from anyone and anything. No neighbors, no noise, no distractions. I thought I would find peace there, but instead, I found only silence. For a week, I lived in that isolation. I walked around, tried to sleep, tried to breathe without the weight of my past crushing me. But it didn't help. The nightmares followed me there, too. The anger, the confusion, the pain. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape her. I called the psychologist again. I needed something. I needed help. He agreed to see me again. I didn't care how far I had to drive. I just needed to feel like I wasn't losing my mind. When I arrived, he didn't waste time. He didn't ask me to talk about the past. He didn't ask me to dwell on the things I couldn't change. Instead, he helped me focus on the future. He made me face the uncomfortable truth. I had to let go. For the first time in months, I felt like there was a chance for me to rebuild. The therapy helped, a lot more than I expected. It didn't erase the hurt, but it gave me perspective. It made me look at the shattered pieces of my life and think, what now? By the end of that week, I felt like I could breathe again. I could think again. I knew I couldn't go back to my old life. The house, the memories, the echoes of her. I sold everything. The house, the car, everything that had once tied me to her. And I moved to California, a new state, a fresh start. At first, I was just floating, unsure of what I wanted, unsure of what I even could want. But then I met her. Her name was Emily. She was kind, patient, and beautiful in ways that didn't make me feel like I was competing with a ghost. She listened to me, but she didn't ask me to relive my past. She let me be who I was now. And for a while, I forgot. I forgot the pain. I forgot the betrayal. I forgot her. But then I found out. One morning, she told me, her hands trembling, her voice uncertain, that she was pregnant. It felt like the ground fell out from under me. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to feel. I was terrified. I didn't want to repeat the mistakes I made before. I didn't want to trust again. But I couldn't run from it. I couldn't run from her either, not now. So here I am, standing on the precipice of a new life, with a woman I care for and a child on the way. But I can't help but wonder if I'm ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. I don't know if I'll ever